So, this is a brand new sentence. If you watch my B-roll, be alert that there are going to be spoilers for Power Wash Simulator. Because apparently Power Wash Simulator has a plot now. And I think this particular level is fun to go into completely blind. So, if you haven't completed Power Wash Simulator's new career mode since the recent update, the 1.0 update, I highly recommend you do that and play through it. So I finally finished the Final 6 duology, which is the Final 6 and the Life Below. And I'm having to re-record this bit because I managed to catch it, that I said the last below instead of the life below. It is the life below. As in the life on Earth and on Europa below space. I think. I don't know, the title's a little weird when you think about it for more than 2 seconds. This duology was fun to read, and didn't really have any more to say about it until I was in the shower, and you know how showers go, so I had this idea, and I realized I do in fact have a video for this week. So, what came to me was that the duology reminded me of something, and as I was thinking what it reminded me of, it hit me. Sword Art Online. Now, hear me out, because this isn't necessarily a bad comparison. This isn't necessarily saying anything negative about the book. So, Sword Art Online, at least the first season that my friends kind of dragged me into watching, kicking and screaming, was a lot of people's gateway anime, and I consider it to be a good introductory anime. Because my friend explained it to me, and now I can see his point of view, and that's where I'm getting this from. None of my ideas are original. So, he explains it better than I do, but basically Sword Art Online contains a lot of the major anime tropes that you see in a very kind of condensed way with not a lot of extremely complex lore. In a premise that is easy for Western audiences to grasp without having to know a whole lot about Japanese culture. So it's a good intro in that way because it has all the ingredients and it's basic enough that you can get into it with little knowledge of the subgenre. And I think the Final 6 duology is this for sci-fi, specifically for maybe young teenagers who might not have read a whole lot of sci-fi before and want to get into it and aren't sure where to start because sci-fi can be kind of a scary genre to get into. It has all the tropes that are pretty key or pretty common in sci-fi in general and a few of the subgenres. Like, it has your hard sci-fi, some soft sci-fi elements, space travel, space opera, exploring another planet. It has all this, and it's only 2 300-page books, which to me felt very compressed, and to me it was hard to get into and to really care about the characters. However, I know that when I was younger, this kind of rushed pace would not bother me as much. So, for younger readers, the kind of shortened pacing could actually be an advantage, because some kids are intimidated by books that could double as doorstops, which again a lot of sci-fi is kind of guilty of. But even though the plot itself is kind of very basic and tropey, there are enough things there that it's enjoyable. It's not just a like paint by number story. I mean, it has elements of that. Sometimes it feels like things happen because they are supposed to happen. And some events just don't flow into each other as well as I wish they would. However, the characters, especially the two leads, Naomi and Leo, are charming and fun to follow. They each have their own character arcs about why they want or don't want to be on this journey and how that changes as they're on the journey. A few of the other cast members get arcs as well, although I wish we could see more of the side characters. There's this one scientist person in particular who's real fun and totally got shafted. The hard sci-fi elements are not as hard as something like The Martian. There are some kind of allowances and kind of hand-wavy things with them. However, they do include a lot of interesting facts about space that I really appreciate as somebody who loves learning facts about space. And one comes to mind, but it's a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it. There's some spoilery things I want to talk about, and I will talk about them later, and I will give warning before I talk about them. Should have learned this lesson from one of my previous videos, but I keep fidgeting my feet in this Epsom salt bath, and it keeps making splashing noises. So if you hear splashing noises, that would be why. I cannot stop. I need to tie my feet down. Sorry, man, I work at a warehouse. I literally do nothing but walk for 9 hours a day, every day, sometimes 6 days a week. So I need to pretty much be constantly soaking in Epsom salts when I'm not walking. Anyway, so there's some tropes in this book that are pretty common in sci-fi that are great things to add to introduce kids to sci-fi. One of these being the space camp that takes up most of the arc of the final 6, the first book. That space camp plotline is brilliant because that seems to be a universal thing among kids, and I know I was fascinated by the process of training to be an astronaut and all the little minutiae that you have to learn to survive in space, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one considering how popular space camp is. They made a whole movie about it, and I think that movie and this book kind of share DNA, because if I'm not mistaken, the plot of that movie involves the kids going on this fun little space camp, but then something goes wrong and they have to go on a real space mission. This one, the going on a real space mission is a foregone conclusion, but otherwise I can see where it might have been inspired by that older movie. My mom loved that movie. I've never actually seen it. I should watch it with her one day. That would be such a nice bonding moment. And also, there's a little bit of Hunger Games-ish stuff thrown in with the whole process of elimination. They take like 24 kids and then they narrow them down to the 6 who will go to space. And every round they eliminate people, or stuff happens unexpectedly to narrow the pool. So that's a nice little touch to add that trope in, because that's a pretty popular trope in YA. Kind of falling off now, but it was more popular in the I want to say late aughts, early 10s. Throughout the 10s, I think. It's starting to fall off now, but I still see it in newer books. I don't know, something about being selected, like either into a Hogwarts house or as a lottery for an event like a ball to meet the prince, or like a space mission in this case. Something about that seems to appeal to teenagers, and I'll have to think more about that and do more research about that, because that's interesting to me. Also, the romantic subplot, which is almost obligatory It feels more natural in this case, given how much time the leads spend together and how much they go through together, and that they also have good chemistry and shared motives and shared interests, and it's actually a pretty good relationship, even if it does develop a little quickly due to the condensed time frame. You even got a little bit of Sci-Fi going on. I think spot jumping in again to mention that Sci-Fi is climate fiction. Sometimes I forget that not everybody knows words. And specifically, Sci-Fi is fiction generally in the future that uses the premise of climate change and how it will affect the planet hypothetically in the future. It's a, I guess, relatively new concept for the genre, although I'm sure there's examples dating way back. It's becoming more common in sci-fi and dystopia, but it's still a relatively new word. It does not roll off the tongue very easily. With not a little bit, a lot of bit of sci-fi going on, because this is a future where we royally fucked up the Earth, which I was talking about that in my Pale Blue Dot video, so it was really uncanny to me to be listening to that audiobook and then reading this book and being like, hey, that's the thing I just listened to about. So it was a little disconcerting, but I liked it in the end. It still had kind of a hopeful message that with our technology and ingenuity, the fact that events happened in this story means that maybe humanity will save itself. However, there's also the evil corporation trope going on, which complicates that hopeful future. Evil corporations are almost like a given in most fiction nowadays, especially YA. And that is completely understandable because they are the mean villains in real life, and that reflects reality. It can get a little tiring though, because corporations tend to be very impersonal and distant, and it's often hard to actually do anything about them. And when something is done about them, it's usually done in an overly dramatic way, like, I don't know, burning down the entire corporate headquarters, or like dramatically storming the castle or something like that. Something that's not as possible in real life nowadays, which makes it a little bit hard to relate to. But I still do appreciate when I see that the villain's an evil corporation, because it's a little bit cathartic to be like, yeah, corporations are evil. I just wish a little more was done with it sometimes. And this is your spoiler warning. I know this book is a couple years old, but I also know that not everybody reads books as soon as they came out. Case in point to me, just reading it now. So, last chance for spoiler warning if you want to go into this book completely blind, which, given how many plot twists there are in this series, I highly recommend going in completely blind if you can. And the couple spoiler tropes that I want to talk about are the other planet / colonization and the alien invasion. And I really wish the alien invasion thing wasn't as glossed over. Like, I don't know, the whole Mars thing kind of confused me. I think it wasn't explained very well what was going on, and it happened and was over too quickly for me to feel any dread or urgency or really much of anything for poor Dev. Yeah, that sucks. It feels like Dev was just killed off so that Leo could take his place, which the characters do acknowledge that in universe, but doesn't make it less sucky. And then there's the colonizing another planet thing, which again, everything to me feels glossed over because I'm an adult and I've read sci-fi that goes more in depth into all of these tropes. But for what is there, I think the whole colonizing another planet thing was handled very well, and I like that they kind of question that concept of colonizing another planet and just assuming that you can just walk in and take it. Because a lot of older sci-fi fell into that colonialist attitude, and I really like that people are becoming more aware of it and changing the narrative about it. Gives me hope that if we ever do become a spacefaring species, that we won't just repeat the mistakes that we did on Earth but in space. Although something that hit me as I was reading this is, oh my god, they literally didn't even hide that they were just pinning the hope of all of humanity on this bunch of teenagers. I still am not quite clear on why it has to be teenagers, other than, like, meta reason that that's their target age demographic. But in universe, everybody's just mostly okay with, like, putting all this on children. Like, that makes no sense from a logical standpoint, because teenagers clearly do not have the capacity to make long-term strategic decisions, especially ones that require you to keep your emotions in check. Their bodies are constantly changing, so if you custom make EVA suits for them in the beginning of the journey, by the time they get to Europa, those EVA suits might not fit, unless you specifically make them so that they can grow with the person. But it's hard to really predict how a person is going to grow in puberty. Also, this just pisses me off because I am a young person dealing with a world that's falling apart. It's like, I just got here and now you're telling me to clean up all this mess? Like, I haven't even had time to look around and catch my breath, and now I have to clean up the mess that's been caused by the past several generations. That's completely unfucking fair. And I wish more stories kind of challenged why a teenager has to save the world. I get that the narrative can be empowering, but it shouldn't be taken for granted that children are the ones who have to save everyone. Like adults have to step up, and I'm including myself in that. Us adults have to step up, because we are still living right now. We still have some tiny little modicum of power. We should be helping. We shouldn't just say, the next generation is going to save us. Like, no, Gen Z and Gen Alpha are badasses, but they shouldn't have to be. No child should have to be a badass to survive or to make some improvement in the world. God, I hate that I'm at the age where I'm, like, mentally parenting all the YA protagonists. Like, what are you doing out there on this quest to save the kingdom? Go back to bed. It's past your bedtime. You have homework to do. So yeah, even though this book does feel kind of compressed and is a little bit hard for me at least to get into, because I like to spend a little more time in situations and with characters and stuff, I still would recommend it to young readers who are new to sci-fi and not sure where to start. I recommend this as one of the first books that they can read. And just for fun, other books that I would recommend are Animorphs, The Lunar Chronicles, also Maximum Ride. Pretty sure that counts as, yes, that is definitely sci-fi. Speaking of book recommendations, what just happened? No, my panda crackers, no! Speaking of book recommendations and like stacks of books, I just got a library card. I'm excited. Pretty much for the first time in my life. Okay, a little bit in college. I had access to a public library too. But that was college. College was a weird time in my life. I barely remember it, and not for fun reasons. So basically, for the first time in my life, I have access to a public library, which means I have a library card, which means I can read books without having to buy them. So I'm definitely going to be reading a lot more books, especially sci-fi, because I am far behind on all the recent sci-fi books that have come out. I am so excited. And I will also see if I can find ebooks and maybe even audiobooks. I've heard that you can get audiobooks with a library card, and I'm going to have to look at that, because even with the discounts, Chirp can get pricey because audiobooks can get pricey, and I burn through them. So that's going to save me a lot of money. I'm excited. And before I forget, if you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. Apparently that actually does something for engagement. I don't know. I never really paid much attention to those kinds of messages and videos, but apparently it does work. So I will start saying that and see if it helps. Anyway, bye.